And we are live. Hey guys, thanks for joining us for part 3 of the Mingling of Souls discussion. This time we're going over chapters 5 and 6. And before we dive in, I'd love to start us with some prayer. So let's dive in. Bless you. That was adorable. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for this time we have to come together and dive into your word and talk about these subjects that can be difficult. Sex and fighting are things that we probably don't do very well most of the time. I pray that you would be glorified in this discussion, and that you would strengthen and encourage us, and that everything we do and say here would bring glory to you. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Alrighty. So, two become one flesh. Yeah, chapter everyone's been waiting for, right? So, who, I ask this every week, who read the chapters?
I did.
She did.
Oh.
Awesome, awesome. So what did you guys think about the sex chapter?
I laughed.
Did.
A few times. I'm not ready for this. That was great. It was awesome.
Poor Amanda. She's so embarrassed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I felt conflicted, so I'll just say that for now.
Okay.
Oh.
We actually didn't get a chance to talk about it beforehand. So.
Oh.
So we've had kind of a busy week.
Yeah.
It's been rough.
Like the times that we've hung out together so far have been like with other people, and I think except for like yesterday morning we saw each other.
Morning we hung out.
Yeah, we saw
great.
each other for like an hour.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
I'm just hanging out. It was wonderful. So chapter 5, two becoming one flesh. So they talk about sex. This is an interesting chapter because I've read that this is a chapter that in Song of, so there are basically two books of the Bible that before the New Testament, Jewish families would not let their children read, and it was Song of Songs and Ezekiel, because Ezekiel also uses a lot of sexual innuendo. And then Song of Songs has this chapter where they just kind of talk about it. So here was something interesting, and everyone here is married, so this will be good. This will be good discussion because everyone will have some insight. He says, right at the beginning, he says, when a married couple finally meet each other sexually for the first time, when it's over, they may think, that's it? That's all it is? That's sex?
I'm laughing again.
Oh,
yeah.
So the $1 million question, was that anyone's experience?
Oh.
I don't know what he said.
I'm sorry, what was the question? We were laughing over here.
Okay. When a married couple meet for the first time sexually, right? So a lot of times the thing that kind of they end with is they go, oh, that's it? That's sex? It's not as great as maybe expecting it to be. Was that anyone's experience?
See?
Welcome to the Rugged Marriage.
Explicit.
I think a better question may be, was that not anybody's experience?
That's probably the right question.
Better question.
I would say that was definitely my experience. Rachel's too. We were both there, so.
We're going to get all the awkward laughter out first, and then...
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Do we need to say all the words?
So I
Um,
think we're all in agreement.
Yes,
that is the tall and short of it. Yes.
Okay.
So the first time was kind of awkward, and I was actually talking with Andrew, actually, who couldn't be with us this time, about this yet. Well, we were talking about something else, but it kind of came up. We were talking about this on Friday, and I made the point to him. I was like, the first time you do anything, right? Like you're not any good at it. Like the first time is supposed to not be great, and then people like do things like have sex for the first time, and they're like shocked when it's awkward and not maybe totally pleasant, and and you kind of get to the end of it, and you're like, oh well, it's over now. Okay.
Or you can't
but-
go anywhere else but up from there. I mean, you can always say that too. It can only
Okay.
get better.
But there's this idea in our culture, right, that like once you get there, it's going to be perfect and it's going to be wonderful, and every time you're just going to slip into it, and there's not going to be any issues. Oh, bless you. And that's not how it works at all, right? Like it takes practice and it takes work. And I like that he says in this book that even though he talks about these aspects of what sex is and what sex is supposed to look like, this is like the ideal. This is like the best. This is like what you're hoping sex will be. This isn't what you really necessarily should expect every time. So for those singles listening, I would encourage you, don't give up after the first time. Keep going, because it gets better. So he kind of breaks down sex from a high level. This was one thing I thought was interesting about this chapter. Like, I had a few singles ask me, like, oh, is this a chapter you think I should read? And the truth is, I didn't really see anything in here that I think would be, like, that would, like, drive someone to lust. Does that make sense? I know Mark Driscoll wrote a book, like, a year before this, and he got a lot of pushback, partially because he describes sexual things in details. But I didn't feel like Matt Chandler did this in a way that was inappropriate or that someone who's single couldn't read. I don't know, what did you guys think?
I would agree, because I've actually read that Real Marriage book and was like, this is good for married couples, but there's no way I would recommend this to a single person. I thought Matt Chandler handled it way better.
That's fantastic. Well, it even says, right, at the very... Sorry, someone else want to jump in? Okay. Well, it even says at the very beginning, right? This is to fix the broken ideas of relationships. And so it seems like he's very aware that not just married people are listening. And that was never his intended audience. So he's... Did you want to talk about something at this part? Okay. So he dives into what sex is, and he breaks it down into about 5 or 6 different headings. And the first one he says is sex is romantic. And specifically, he talks a lot about romance from the man's point of view, what the man should be doing, right? And he says, don't be in a hurry. I'm trying to think of the right question to facilitate discussion. I did like where he talks about telling her she's beautiful, that she probably felt really insecure, that as they're going through this chapter, some theologians believe that she's actually maybe undressing for him. And so he's kind of he's either describing her as he's looking at her, right? He's taking it all in, or he's describing her as she's kind of undressing before him. And I like this idea of having him kind of encourage, telling men, hey, encourage her. Encourage her in this. Let her know that she's beautiful. Let her know that you love her. Even before you guys start maybe touching, because you're both really vulnerable, right? And women tend to have this a little more men on the physical side, where it's like, okay, now you're seeing all of me for the first time, and it's kind of there's shame. Like I know Rachel and I were scared a lot of ways because we'd never been naked in front of someone else before, and so it was awkward and frightening. And
Are you looking for me for
no, I'm
affirmation?
no. Well, she knows I'm telling the truth. And that was something I think I kind of had to learn, was how to encourage her to feel comfortable, and myself kind of to feel comfortable.
Well, I like that he points out that, you know, even before they begin sexually, that he begins to say, your soul is very beautiful. So yes, he describes her physical beauty, but ultimately, you know, he was admiring her inside and out, that she was compatible to him in both ways. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and that didn't begin the instant before he decided he was going to go for it.
Yeah.
Like, it continued into that. It didn't
Yeah.
just begin to achieve a desired purpose.
That's a great point. That their whole relationship was him encouraging her,
Right.
and this was just an outpouring of that.
Right.
I think it I guess it's a model for us as men, because I know, well, I just speak personally, but I mean, I guess if y'all agree, y'all can. But a lot of times, like, I know personally, I get there's times where you can be one-track minded whenever, there's I guess when you're aroused and all that, like when you're with your wife and you're all about to be intimate, like it can be a very one-track minded thing, if you allow it to be. So, like he's saying here, he's trying to realign himself with the gift that God has given him, instead of it just being her being an ends to a means, an ends to a mean. A means to an end. She's actually someone, not something that he's using. I think that's his what he wrote was a good example of that there's someone, not something.
Yeah. Not just about satisfying yourself, right?
Right.
It's about pouring into one another.
Well, I think there's a lot of other times in Song of Solomon that he refers to her. He uses analogies like, her being a doe, or her being like sheep, or her being like, different aspects of her. But all these pictures of these creatures that, essentially kind of have to be wooed by someone in order to be close to them. And so he definitely had this understanding that he had to kind of nurture the closeness between them. And I think that's a good description of how men need to treat women in sex, and I liked that.
Yeah. Oh man, his explanation of the two fawns in the that was brilliant. Yeah, like you approach them gently, like you don't want to scare them away or anything like that. You don't tackle them. You don't throttle them. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I can put myself out there. I mean, like physically, like if Alex were to even say one little thing that I even thought was negative towards my body, I would want to hide it from him. And that's my brokenness and my sinfulness. But it's a challenge for him to go, okay, well, how do I need to pursue her in this way and love her in this way? And so he works really hard to be very careful about, how he speaks about me, which is good, which is encouraging, but that's, it's hard to be verbal in that way when you're not used to it, I would think. Going from...
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I imagine it's frightening. It's frightening for both parties, I think, because you're totally exposing yourself.
Yeah, I think it was a series from R.C. Sproul that I was listening to about shame, and when Adam and Eve, when God created Adam and Eve, they were naked and felt no shame, right? So like there was no there was no shame, there was no sin, there was nothing. like that. Then they sinned, and they saw their nakedness, and they ran and hid, So our just it's our like y'all said, it's the sinful nature that causes us to feel that shame, and but as the word says that the Lord is a spirit, and where the spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom, So we have freedom from that shame. Like we can, when we truly, when we yeah, exactly. Like, maybe he doesn't feel any shame. We can, but we have that outlook, and when we understand why we got married, the vows we took, for better or for worse, that's including our bodies, there should be no reason for shame, but if there is, then we need to encourage each other, in those areas where there is, a weakness.
I heard an amazing quote recently, and Alex, you've heard me say this, but basically, like, Satan would have our shame cause us to run and hide, exactly like you said. But Jesus would have our shame cause us to run to him for clothing. So there is a way where shame can be used to glorify God and draw us closer to him for clothing, because he's the only one who can cover up our shame.
Amen.
Yeah.
Agreed. And so we're also sort of talking about it. Sex is tender, right? Like you said, it's you don't grab at fawns, right?
Tackle them or choke them.
Yeah. I heard another guy say it's like those are the animals you see at the petting zoo, right?
Oh yeah, there it is.
I don't know. I know that he's mostly speaking from the perspective of like he's trying to just talk about like a Christian perspective and just talk about what the scriptures is saying, are saying. But I couldn't help but think in all my own early young person perception of sex and what I saw in the world. Obviously, it's completely opposite than a biblical perspective of sex, but sex that is portrayed in the world is just, everything is about you, and so there's no tenderness or like romance isn't about you being tender to that other person. It's about what you get out of it without Christ. And so it's amazing to me to think about that because of Christ our sexual relationship even has a different aspect than it would if we were not believers, and that just kind of blows my mind that that aspect of our lives has changed so much because of Christ.
Yeah. When he talks about this, right, that sex is not being interested necessarily in our own gratification, but in the gratification of our partner. I think it's a picture ultimately of this idea of sacrifice and submission, where both parties are ultimately striving to see the greatest enjoyment of the other party. And if done right, that means both parties receive the greatest enjoyment, right? You're sacrificing kind of your desires and you're submitting to your partner's desires, and in doing that, you both give the other one kind of what they want. And it becomes better than if you just said, I'm going to get what makes me feel best, or I'm going to do what I feel is best.
Yeah, like instead of having it a competition of who can satisfy themselves the most or the fastest, I've heard it put that like it's a competition of who can outdo the other person in satisfying them the most. And then both people are being really satisfied.
Yeah. Amanda comes back at that point.
Yeah. You can say anything explicit.
No, and he also says that it's passionate, right? That it shouldn't. Oh, sorry. You want to say something?
Well, I think that we should say something about pornography because he brings that up at the end of that section. Just because there are so many people and a lot of single people who struggle with it, both men and women. And I don't know. What did you guys think about that section? Does anybody remember it?
That's true.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, it comes in many forms, you know, and I think he mentions it in there. Like, I guess typically for guys, it's visual, and then for women, a lot of times it's like those novels, you know, that kind of go into, you know, the man comes in and sweeps the woman off her feet and all these kind of outlandish, or, you know, I guess they, in the book, I mean, I think, I don't know, maybe men are capable of some of those things, or maybe all of them over the course of years. But the way it's written is like, it's just, I mean, that's just the way it is every day, you know. And then so it sets unrealistic expectations for men on that side, but then on the actual pornographic side for men, it sets unrealistic expectations for women.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all facade. It's all fake. It's all it's all acting. It's portraying intimacy, but it is not that.
Right.
It is totally fake. And he said that basically, like, pornography does not describe like true intimacy. Pornography describes what a man lusts after, basically. Like, that's what it's an example of.
Yeah. It's broken. There's no relationship. There's no bad days. There's no sore muscles. You know, there's nothing.
Headaches.
There's no headaches. There's no doing that hurts
No exhaustion. You're not tired.
Yeah. I mean, and there's just I mean, yeah, it's not real life at all. Well, and it trains people wrongly, how to look at it wrongly, because you get the wrong sort of gratification. You know, a porn movie and a porn book never hurt you, but they also never get close to you, and it's just so surface level that it just breaks everything.
You say when they don't hurt you, do you mean like fighting with you or breaking your heart type hurt, or?
Yeah, they can't get close enough to hurt you, and they also can't get close enough to love you. So you don't have anything. There's no depth there. There's nothing there besides the lust, like you said.
Like, it over promises and under delivers every time.
Yeah.
I'd say that even would include not just blatant pornography, but I mean most sitcoms, you know, on TV in general, you know, they resolve problems in 30 minutes, you know, or less every time, and it's like that's not the way things work in real life, and even like a show like Friends, you know, where pretty much everybody slept with everybody at some point on the show over the course of the 10 years or whatever it was on. But they're all okay with it. They're all still friends. There's no animosity. You know, there's no real heartbreak. Yeah, and it's like that would never happen in real life, ever.
Yeah. It'd be devastation and destruction and ruined lives left and right.
Oh yeah. The show would have to change its name to Enemies.
Yeah.
Well, and there's this thing that goes around now where you have, I mean, you know, divorce is still a big issue, even though it's not 50%. But divorce is still a big issue because people want what they want. And there's this whole thing of men right now in kind of my age range where a lot of men would rather explicit masturbate than have sex with their wives. And the reason is because they know exactly what feels good, they can do it quickly, and it's not nearly as much work. And their wives have to learn how to make them feel good, basically. And with their wives, they have to work to make their wives feel good. And so they choose the shameful, simple lust of pornography over striving to love and sacrifice for their wives. And it's something new that's come with the internet age, and it's just massacring relationships left and right. And it's directly the child of pornography.
If this is a tangent that you don't want to address now, say so. But would you guys say that that is sin regardless? Anytime, no matter what you're thinking about, even if it's your wife? Menage a un is not acceptable.
Masturbating?
Yeah.
I would say it's always unwise.
Yeah, I
That's
think
the
it's
safe answer.
yeah, we I mean, obviously, even though it's being broadcast, I know we're kind of whatever, but I mean,
It's okay.
I mean,
we got your back.
yeah, exactly, yeah. This ain't going outside of this circle, so we're all right. But no, I mean, we made an agreement, that we're not gonna do that. Only pleasure we find is in each other, with each other, not apart from each other. So, to me, I think both of us would probably agree. That would more so drive you together because when those urges come up, you're only seeking it from your partner. So if there if there's a lack there, or if there's a space and time where you're not able to be intimate with your partner, and then you have the opportunity to just take care of yourself. It's like you're cheating on your partner. You're finding pleasure elsewhere when you should only find it through your partner. And like I said, that's the way we view it. I don't know if how everybody else feels about it, but to me, I think that's really helped us because there's she didn't have to worry about me when she's not here, that I'm home thinking about her or whatever. Only thing that we have is not the only thing, but yeah, the most important thing we have is each other, and we don't step outside of that.
Yeah. I wonder if simply God designed that pleasure to be experienced with your covenant partner.
Yeah, I think there's something very spiritually challenging of your partner always being the one who's in front of you, because it kind of forces you to face, and deal with things. It's kind of, hopefully I can say this clearly. When we have communion, we are told to be right with others before we come to the communion table, and not have sin out, because communion is to be taken as a body, as one, and sex is something that is for one. And so if we have brokenness and we have sin between us and we're not able to come together, it needs to be taken care of. And so there's a distinct challenge in saying, okay, instead of me going and seeking my own satisfaction, I need to pursue my spouse, and I need to love them more than myself, and I need to ask for forgiveness for whatever sin that I've done against them, or or I need to persevere and wait for them. So that's kind of the direction of thinking that I tend to lean towards it, because it's challenging, because it's if something is so easy to do, then probably it should be something that should be thought through.
Well, and it's always it always misses the point, right? Like the sacrificial submissive thing, clearly designed, is part of the covenant. Doing it separate from that covenant, it's just always, I can't think of a single instance where doing it is strengthening of the covenant, or it seems like part of the point. How can you sacrifice for your spouse by doing that? You know what I mean? How can you submit to your spouse by doing that? I don't think you can. I think by definition it's a lonesome separation activity, if that makes sense. And I think it ultimately misses the point. I like what you said about persevering.
Yeah, I think to kind of piggyback on that, also you don't want to use it to medicate a problem either. You know, like if you're fighting, you use this how we make up. You know, this how we say we're sorry. I don't think you want to do that either. Like you said, you want to get right with each other. You know, just like with communion. I think that's a great illustration.
Having getting together, becoming one, is not
Yeah, yeah,
solve the problem.
yeah.
Not the other thing
What?
that we're
Oh,
talking about.
no, I'm talking about love making. I mean, yeah.
You shouldn't
Yeah.
use that to solve your
My
problem.
bad. I guess I wasn't clear. Yeah. Like you shouldn't. Yeah, that the two of you shouldn't come together in the sense of like, you know, if you're fighting, like this is how we're gonna make up. Like we shouldn't do that together. You should mend that fence first, and then, you know, then get after it.
Yeah. What do you think, Chad?
Oh man. Yeah, I think what you said, Alex, seemed to just like nail it for me. Like I don't know, you have a way of saying things that I just understand what your point is before you even finish saying it. So you sort of solidified that for me. And again, I seem to be like a weird quote machine or something where I just remember all these silly quotes. But CS.
No. I was gonna say.
Would you like to say something?
No, I don't. It's not productive.
Okay.
And I was like, I want to quote C.S. Lewis first, actually.
Did I say C.S. Lewis, or did you just read my mind that I was going to quote him?
No, you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he says like there's two kinds of pleasure. Like pleasure that there's good pleasure and bad pleasure. The pleasure you pay for first, and then the pleasure you pay for afterwards. And the pleasure you pay for first is always the greater pleasure. And yeah, I think that could definitely be applied to putting the effort into overcoming your wife's weird hair mustache and pursuing her for mutual satisfaction as designed by God, which you've got to put the effort into first, opposed to just satisfying yourself, paying for that later in the form of a damaged relationship with you and your wife, because now you've just added more selfishness to it.
Yeah. Moving a little bit into the passionate section, Heather Perkins on YouTube said this, and I think this is perfect because I think this is exactly what they're talking about. He's talking about in the next section. She says, "One thing I thought about while reading this chapter is the fact that some adults try to teach their children that sex is bad. They may be trying to keep them from sex before marriage, but that's something that sticks with them, even in married life, and can be hard to get rid of that thought process." I think maybe this is a little more, maybe something that women teach than men teach their children. I know, Rachel, you've talked a little bit about how you've heard women say things like, well, sex is for the man, or sex is not about both parties enjoying the experience. It's about, well, you just stomach it until he's done. Yeah. Isn't that the most sinful, horrible thing?
That's awful.
Yeah.
Well,
I think, well, and most of the, being older now and kind of being able to look back and kind of understand more what was going on from an adult's perspective. I was like a younger teenager when I heard some women kind of dumped that on me, but it seemed like it was out of their bitterness and their own sin that they were having in their marriages, and they chose to try to influence other people with their hurt, and kind of let others experience it too, I guess. In a sense, kind of like we should warn younger women, that sex is bad and it's just not worth it, so that they'll just stay away from it. And that's just so sinful and so wrong because it's not the gospel. And so, yeah, that's kind of where that came from.
do any of the women have women tell them, you just have to deal with it?
Yes. I was telling Laramie about that today, that I had several married friends of mine before I got married that would just tell me like, yeah, just to wait to get it over with, and just really negative, not really anything positive to say about that. And I remember thinking like, I've waited my whole life for this, and I was like, it's gonna be special, it's gonna be good, I'm gonna make it. But I think I can't, I want to tell people on the other extreme, like, it's such a beautiful and amazing thing when it's done right, and you just don't want to. It's such a devastating thing when it's done wrong, and that's the point I want to go at with our kids. I don't want to hide from it and tell them it's bad, because the minute if they give into that and they're like, this isn't bad, this is awesome, I want to let them know how much more amazing it is, or how amazing it is when it's done right. So.
Yeah, balance is key, right? We're often presented with two polar opposites of sin. So idolize sex or stay away from it because it's bad. Both of those are equally egregious, and definitely a balance needs to be struck.
Well, even though the last section is about the gospel, I will just say that with that subject, as believers, we are to constantly exhort those around us who are unbelievers with the gospel, but we are also to encourage each other in the gospel, because we constantly need it, and and sex falls within that. If we're speaking the gospel to each other, we're not going to speak negatively about the covenants that God sets up for us and allows us to have. It's a beautiful thing, not a terrible thing, and so yeah, I think there's a lot of hope when we have people who love God and who are willing to speak His words and be an encouragement.
Well, I think men too hear a lot that sex is going to be a battle in marriage. Like, oh yeah, your wives are just going to be. I mean, all of popular media tells you this, right? Like, if you're not married, sex is something that women just throw at you, right? According to television and movies and stuff. But if you are married, sex is something that you just fight every day and you can never get it, and your wife's always going to be pushing you away. I mean, that is 90% of the plot lines of every sitcom, right? Like, oh, well, he's trying to get with his wife, and she says no. Look how emasculated he is. And that's not what it should be. It should be reciprocal. It should be enjoyable. It should be passionate. It should be tender. It should be romantic. It should have aspects where both parties are enjoying it. So sex is also holy. What do you guys think that means? I'd love to hear the sharps discuss the holiness.
But you guys are doing so good. No, I was reading that part there, and I was just kind of like, it was very interesting to see the different parallels between what the world says sex is and what Scripture says it is, because they're two completely different things. And when you read through this and you see how Solomon is going about it, and just the way that he's talking about it, just the approach of it in general, just is so different, and it's so there's just so much grace about it, when he's going about doing it and trying to it's kind of, I don't know, I'm really bad with words. Words are hard. But his words are filled with so much grace when it comes to him talking to his wife and leading up to that act, that it's just so different from how the culture is just like, no, just give me what I want now, Mm-hmm. And so there definitely is that picture of servanthood and also sacrifice as well, because like you guys have said, there's been some guys who will tell the younger people growing up that sex is something you have to fight for, and usually when people in my church would tell me that, I would just be like, well, you are probably doing something wrong then if that's the case. Because I read Song of Solomon, I just read through Scripture, and I don't see it being a struggle or a chore, so to speak. It's something that is beautiful, and it is holy because there's just so much grace about it.
Yeah, it's something uniquely designed for marriage.
Yeah. Hope that made sense.
No, it was beautiful. It was great. You said very well said.
Cool.
I think that is one thing that maybe even the church doesn't really talk about. We say set aside sex for marriage, but we don't really explain why. That it is this thing designed for marriage as part of this gospel presentation of marriage, as part of this sacrifice and submission, and the covenantal nature, and we become one with our spouse, we become one with God. I am like Christ. He dwells within me. Right? There's a lot of things you could look at there and say, well, there are pictures of this in marriage, and some of those pictures are sex. And without all the pieces in place, it seems to me that sex doesn't work. I've heard Matt Chandler say, I don't think he says it in this book, but in sermons I've heard him say that sex for non-Christians can never be as good as it can be for Christians, because it requires a holy spiritual dimension that the unbeliever will never bring into their relationship. For believers, in addition to the physical act and maybe even the emotional act, there's a spiritual union of two people that we recognize and embrace as part of the physical and emotional union that happens. And I think that's a wholly set-apart thing for marriage, that as a single person engaging in any kind of sexual activity, whether it's masturbation or oral sex or anything, you just can't have that without the covenant of marriage and literally living life with someone, and two, becoming one, made one by God. One thing he doesn't talk about at all in this chapter, that I don't think we should get too sidetracked on, but I remember growing up, I heard a lot that sex is how God marries two people. And so what happened is, this was a really popular thing in the 90s and early 2000s. And what happened was people would take that and they would say, oh, well, I slept with this person, so we're married in God's eyes, and we'll just get married in the States later. And that was something I heard people say all the time. And those people never got married, and their lives were nothing but death and destruction and horror. And I think that's part of what he's trying to get at in the Sex is Holy section, is that this is a thing that is set apart for marriage, because there's all this stuff that has to be in place for sex to even be a non-destructive thing. For it to bring people together, we already have to be together, be made together by God.
Yeah, and it's unique and special and unique and specific to that coupling as well. So I think in that way it's also set apart. Like, it will never look the same between two people, well, two different couples. Not that we should know, but I don't think it will.
Yeah, each of us is going to experience it differently.
I kind of think about it as if, like, when you learn a language with somebody, you're learning, their culture, you're learning, kind of about their families, their backgrounds, their, what is their country like, all those kinds of things. And I found that to be true, in sex, that it's like, having a language between you that only you two speak. It's very, very unique, and nobody's going to understand it, and they shouldn't. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I agree. You're good. It's our book. It's mine is yours.
Okay.
And then I like this last section where he talks about sex is about the gospel. No, we already kind of hit that.
Okay.
Sex is reciprocal, but I was just going to say both parties.
He was going out of order.
No, we already talked about it. We already talked about it. I have notes. I take notes because I'm a nerd. Um, I like that he talks about.
Even nerds can marry nice girls.
Exactly.
Be
All you guys-
encouraged, watchers.
Yes. All you guys who like Firefly and Star Trek, there's a woman out there for you.
It's true. It's true. I like both of those a lot.
Or theology books. I like theology books a lot, and she still loves me.
What if, though, like, the woman is the nerd?
Then there's a man out there for you,
Yeah.
nerdy
No,
lady.
not for you, Amanda. He means like a
And he's taken.
yeah.
His name is Chad.
All right, I'll let you skip this time.
We didn't skip. We talked about
Just
it.
teasing.
Sorry.
Yeah, I do think though. Actually,